whatever you need.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining. Do a couple of introductions here, and then we'll talk about how we're going to facilitate the call and see where it takes us. So welcome everybody. Appreciate everybody taking their lunch hour to have this candid conversation. I'm Brian Repsold, and I am the current president of CCA, and I'm also the VP of Total Rewards with Donnelly Financial Solutions. And my co-facilitator, Dave, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Dave Carroll, and I help Brian with CCA. So I'm not sure what my formal title is there, but anyway, I am the VP in charge of Global Total Rewards for McDonald's Corporation.
So once again, welcome everybody. CCA is, the purpose of this call, I guess, is we're trying to continue the conversation we started with our annual summit in June. As many of you may know, normally we would have had almost a full day face-to-face event, but given the current circumstances and the global pandemic, we weren't able to do that. But we did have a very highly attended panel discussion with panelists, and then questions from the audience and conversation related to the pandemic, related to rewards and what people are doing, what your peers are doing, and how you're grappling with Total Rewards challenges during this ongoing pandemic. So we thought we'd continue that conversation, and today specifically we picked two topics to just kind of bat around and drill into a little bit deeper. Incentive compensation, and then merit planning and merit planning decisions. However, this is your session, really, as members of CCA. If there are other topics on your mind, feel free to share. If we don't get to them today, we'll catalog them, and we plan on having additional conversations like this in the future. The next one will be sometime in August. So, we'll catalog it for a future date. So in terms of housekeeping, although I think we have control over muting people's phones, just make sure you mute your phone when you're not talking. And obviously, as always, don't put your phone on hold in case we need to listen to music that's on the other end. If you have to dial in, redial in, and come back when you're ready. This is an open conversation. We're just facilitating. So if somebody has the floor, just let them finish talking before you jump in. Just be courteous to your peers. And make sure you introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, your title, your company. And lastly, participate. It's your call, and we're just trying to facilitate the conversation and really see what's going on. And I think, we're all struggling with the same issues, but there may be some very specific issues to the Chicagoland area that may creep up depending on the topic. And, we're all in this together. So we're looking forward to your insights and experiences. So let's get started. So the first topic is incentive compensation. I think we've all seen webinars on the topic. I know I've been attending the virtual rewards conference put on by World at Work, and seems like every Wednesday they have another speaker that's talking about something related to this topic. What are you doing within your organizations? How are you even going through the reforecasting related activities? What are you communicating to employees? So, thought we'd just throw out incentive compensation as a topic and see if anybody has any specific experience that they're going through right now that they'd like to share, or any specific questions you might even want to tee up for your peers to respond to based on challenges that you're currently facing. So Becky, can people unmute their phones themselves?
Yes, everyone can unmute, and you can also, if you just hover over your name, you can unmute, or even click on your video. So if anybody needs help, You can type in the chat as well if you prefer to give your question, or if you need help, just let me know.
That's great.
Hi, this is Sarah Bergstead.
Hi, Sarah.
I'm with Amita Health here in Illinois and kind of Ascension Health nationwide. I just figured I'd kind of ask, we've made the decision to not go ahead with performance reviews or merit increases this year. As you know, typical with healthcare organizations, even though we've been busy, it's been an financial hit. And I'm just curious how many people out there are still doing merit increases as the norm this year.
Why don't I kick it off? I can share a little bit about what we're working through at McDonald's right now. And first of all, at this point in time, we're still looking at doing merit increases, so annual salary adjustments, and we have not finalized our budgets yet on that. We're anticipating that the budgets will be, when we get the market data. And we've been looking at some of the market data coming in so far, but I think, I want to see a more recent read on what companies are doing. So we'll see where that all lands. But clearly, we are in the position similar to other companies where we need to be very cognizant of the financial hit that we've incurred with the pandemic. But the plans are right now to still do increases. It's just a matter of what does that budget look like. The performance reviews is a really interesting question. The short answer, just getting on one company perspective, we're still gonna move forward with doing performance reviews. What we've done though is we've taken a step back and looked at, okay, well, what's our typical guidance here? And typically we do a 20-70-10 distribution, performance distribution, 20% exceptional. We're on a 4 rating system, 20% exceptional, 70% significant, and then 10% improvement required or unacceptable. And over the last several years, we've put a lot of emphasis on getting more disciplined on this. This is a year, though, that we know we need to be a lot more flexible for multiple reasons. The first is it's just been a crazy year, and we want to make sure that we're just being cognizant that people were uprooted in terms of how they typically do their jobs, and we want to make sure that we're being empathetic of that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're keeping in mind that hey, you know what, some people are performing better than others, and we want to make sure that we continue the work we've done over the last several years around performance motivation. And so we're going to be more flexible with the distribution, the performance distribution this year. The other part is we went back and we looked at how we define our performance ratings, and we added a lot more texture to what constitutes each rating, and put it in a COVID context, right? So that make it easier for people managers to be able to really differentiate between those that have stepped up, have really stepped up, or conversely those that have kind of disappeared a little bit. So not disappeared, you know what I mean. Those that maybe haven't stepped up as much. So added a lot more context into the ratings. We'll do more training for our people managers as well, so that they can interpret that and apply that. But we want to make sure that we're being empathetic, but at the same time, not lose the momentum that we've gained around, driving accountability and driving motivation around performance. So just one perspective. There's no right or wrong answer on something like this. At least I don't think there is. But just philosophically, in terms of what we're looking to do as an organization and the circumstances, that's the direction that we decided to go. One example.
Anybody else have any experiences or anything planned that's, either out of the ordinary or, what might be different than what others are experiencing, especially those that aren't doing a merit this year, that they'd like to share?
Oh, hi. So my name's Diane Link. I actually don't work in HR. I I just enrolled in the Loyola Masters in HR program, and so I'm taking the compensation course right now. And so for my company, so I'm in the business, and we actually this year we won't do performance reviews, but it's not due to COVID. It's just been a practice change that we're not going to be doing reviews, and we switched to more of a like continuous conversations approach. Yeah, so that's something different that we're doing. I think so far, I think there's probably some managers that are doing the conversations and maybe some others. So I think it'll be kind of remain to be seen. But I think it's a good idea. I always kind of struggled with, kind of putting people into the buckets. Yeah, so that'd be my feedback.
Others? Anyone else with experience they want to share? I guess I can go ahead and share, at least, my experience with DFIN, and it's a little bit different than I think the way McDonald's and what Dave described, and a little bit different than the way they're looking at it. We've done merit increases where we've had to, but for the most part, I think given the circumstances and given some other things that we needed to do, I mean, we were deemed an essential business, so we had a lot of folks that were in a manufacturing environment, specifically in a print environment, that have been going into work and going into the into the plants ever since the pandemic started. So, we had some premium pay for a period of time and things of that nature. So, we decided, given that offset, that we would only do it where it was necessary, but in the interim, we're doing a complete overhaul of our comp structure, and really taking this time and this opportunity to expedite that process and expedite the evaluation of where we are from a competitive standpoint, so that we can really start thinking about budgeting for next year. And once we start understanding, where will merit budgets land and things like that, we're basically using this as a year to kind of look at things more strategically and figure out what do we want to do going forward. And this has given us a little bit of an opportunity and a little bit of latitude to kind of get that all finalized before we have to finalize budgets going into 2021. So it's a little bit different perspective, on how we're tackling it. Anybody else? Is anybody having specific conversations about, what you're going to do differently and or the same with regards to merit budgets for 2021? I know that was a question that came up out of our annual summit. I think we had conversations about the fact that they're probably not going to look the same as they have for the past several years, where they've been pretty stagnant and at a consistent level, give or take a couple tenths of a percentage point. But what we haven't seen quite yet is what are those numbers going to look like, and are people looking at it differently or thinking about it differently going into 2021? And I'd be curious if anybody has any specific experiences or has had those conversations already and or made decisions. Nobody? Okay. Well, why don't we shift back then to incentive compensation? Obviously we're halfway through the year now, or just past halfway through the year. Anybody doing anything or having any specific conversations around how you're viewing incentive opportunity or incentive compensation for the year, either because of financials being completely out of sync with goals that were originally established, or just anything you're contemplating, anything you've communicated recently, or anything that you're thinking about doing differently, given kind of a mid-year checkpoint and what you set out to accomplish versus where you anticipate the year may actually end up?
Hi, this is Heather Bailey. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello, Heather.
Great. Hi. So I work for the Mars organization, and we actually have a little bit of a unique situation where with our diverse portfolio of businesses, we have some businesses that are doing really well per the impact of COVID, and some are not. And so we sort of have adopted this philosophy of let the runners run. And for those that are doing well, we're going to keep annual targets and goals and see where that plays out. For the businesses that are underperforming, we're actually shifting more towards an enterprise-wide objective for those teams, noting that, you know, our strategic focus for the rest of the year is really on preserving cash. And so we have sort of adopted a little bit of a split philosophy depending on where our businesses are performing, which I think is a little bit unique, but it keeps the motivation for those that are both, you know, overperforming and underperforming. I think there's been a question, you know, the past few months of what's going to happen to bonus. So hopefully it provides some motivation and some focus throughout the end of the year.
Hey, Heather, a couple questions on that. The ones that are in parts of the business that aren't doing that well, is it a shift in terms of the weighting of part of their bonus being based on the enterprise level, and then part of it being based on their business unit, and you're playing with the weighting, so you're putting more weighting on the enterprise level? Or is it an actual switch where, look, originally their bonus was going to be based off the business unit, now you remove that and you said your bonus now will be based on enterprise level results?
Absolutely. So we are actually anticipating that those businesses will be performing under 50% of their target.
Okay.
And we would then shift all of their weighting towards an enterprise-wide objective based on a cash metric.
Got it. And then for the businesses that are performing really, really well, are you, in terms of letting the runners run, are you going to completely let the runners run, or is there any kind of check there? Clearly, you probably have some maximums that you put into your plan, but did you adjust any of those maximums, or are you going to let it ride?
So we haven't adjusted the maximums or the stretch targets. There's been actually a lot of conversation between, you know, the comp committee and the business as far as should we be pulling back, right? Did the business outperform because of their strategy or because of the impact of COVID? So I think there's still conversations going on. We've been talking about, quote, guardrails put in place that certain, you know, other metrics need to be met in order for, you know, maximums to be paid out. So that's a little bit, I think, undecided at this point, but definitely in the conversation.
Great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Actually, Sarah, I have one more question for you. How transparent are you being with employees? I mean, is this being communicated upfront to employees, and do they know what to expect to, you know, keep the motivation going, or is this something that's still conversations and, you know, hasn't necessarily been communicated broadly?
Absolutely. So there's been probably within the next 24 hours will be a company-wide communication that is a more of at a corporate level describing the changes, and then we've asked each specific business leader to follow up specifically with their business and in terms of what that means for their specific associates. But yeah, our plan is to have 100% transparency because, you know, in our minds it is good news for associates.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Others having similar experience, or, you know, a completely different experience?
Hi, this is Amy Bartouche from Hollister.
Hey, Amy.
Hi. So there's been some discussions around not giving merit increase, but giving bonus payouts. And I just want, which normally, you know, you would argue the opposite. Is anybody else having any discussions around that?
Amy, this is Sarah, and that's actually what Amita's doing. Instead of merit, we're giving out flat bonus payout this fall.
This is Jim Byrne from the University of Chicago Medicine, and maybe it's a healthcare thing, but we're doing the same kind of approach where we'll pay a partial bonus in fiscal 20. We're on a June 30 fiscal ending, July 1 starting. So for last year, we'll pay a partial bonus. We won't have merit or incentives this coming year unless there's a dramatic recovery, because COVID is very expensive in the healthcare world to treat all the patients that are uninsured. So,
and for those of you that are, sounds like there's, you know, some of this is going through healthcare, and, you know, Amy, you'd brought up the topic. You know, is this something that's being communicated proactively to employees, letting them know, you know, we're not planning on doing a merit, but we do plan on doing something based on performance or some other criteria with bonus payouts? Or, you know, is it still kind of a, you know, we communicated we're not doing merits, but haven't necessarily communicated that we're going to do something else, you know, in exchange, or, you know, to try to make up some ground?
Well, we have not communicated anything because we're still in the decision-making mode. I mean, at some point, we obviously we would need to communicate. I do have another follow-up though. Is there anybody who's global who's considering doing bonuses only in no merit, so not just U.S. operations but globally, and are they also doing it outside of the U.S.?
I mean, I can tell you from our perspective, we're global. You know, we basically are not doing merits, but we do intend on doing bonuses, and we're doing it globally. But you know, we're not, you know, we're not necessarily in a position where, you know, I don't think we're going to be at 50% of targets or anything like that. So, you know, it may not be a, you know, as reasonable of a litmus test as some others that are doing it because they're, you know, because they just have some difficult challenges that they're facing financially. But, you know, we tend to do, we're planning on doing it globally. I mean, we're not going to change our stand there.
And Brian and Jim, for those that, if you're providing bonuses, will it be a variation of the regular incentive, so a percentage of, or will it be, are you looking at doing kind of a flat dollar amount, you know, whether it be based on level or whatever, that would be provided? So is it kind of like making an adjustment to the bonus program and providing a portion of that, or is it more of like a kind of just a lump sum cash amount that's paid out as a bonus, but it's really just a, you know, a discretionary dollar amount that's determined, that's consistent? Or is it
I
something?
would say ours is the last option you gave. We're giving a flat amount based on whether you're a full-time employee. It'll be less if you're registry. Obviously, healthcare, we have a lot of registry folks. But it's not based on anything but that. And luckily, we have a new CEO who actually started, I think, when COVID just started. And so he's already been communicating stuff. So that's been good to see that stuff is communicated. But I think even though financially we've been put in a hard position, they wanted to do something because, you know, our staff in the hospitals had done so much amazing work. They wanted to try to do something. So I think that's what it comes down to.
Got it. Thank you.
And in our case at UCM, we went to our comp committee and our board, and basically what we looked at is how we were performing pre-COVID and post-COVID, and created a common multiplier. It's going to be used as the company performance for all the bonuses.
That's helpful. Thanks, Jim.
Others on the topic, or other approaches that organizations are contemplating or batting around at this point in time?
This is Ira Finn. I'm at Ryan Specialty Group, an insurance firm, about 3,000 employees in the US. And I think our first reaction 3-4 months ago was to relook at our incentives, bring down some of our targets, and kind of more reactionary to the market. And after kind of business has settled down, we've now taken an approach that, we're going to keep our plans in place for the remainder of the year, that business is going well. So keeping merit and bonus in place for this year.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Others? Anybody that's, doing something completely different than the types of things that have been brought up so far?
I guess, Brian, an add-on question to that is there seems to be a lot of what I read on this is the wait and see type of approach, right? And clearly there's some organizations have already made decisions. We talked about some of that, right, on this call. But I'm curious, are a lot of folks that that haven't spoken up yet, are you more in the wait and see camp in terms of let's see how the year plays out? Let's see them based on how we bounce back, or the impact of a resurgence, et cetera, how the stock price bounces back if you're a publicly held company, how the guidance starts to shake out in terms of what institutional investors or proxy advisors are saying about adjustments to plans. Are a lot of folks in that wait and see category? It'd be interesting to know. Or is it, or is that, again, just more of a question? It could be a yes or no. It doesn't, we don't have to have a lot of context, but I'm just curious for those that haven't spoken up yet.
So this is Melissa Schulman from Takeda. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Yes.
So I didn't speak up with the question about doing things radically differently than how we've done in the past, but I do want to share because I think what we're doing is different than those who have spoken so far on this call. Part of it might be, it's probably twofold. Part of it, I think, is the timing of our fiscal year. Our fiscal year is April 1st through March 31st. So our fiscal year was ending just as all of this was starting up. And so we ended our fiscal year still in a pretty strong position. We did not make any adjustments to our annual bonus payments. They ran as is, and our overall performance for the fiscal year was pretty strong because COVID didn't really hit until the very, very end of our fiscal year. We did, as far as merit increases, annual salary adjustments went, we did not make any decreases to the budgets, but just asked our leaders to really be fiscally responsible in terms of how they used those merit budgets. So we did not make any major changes, but I do think some of it had to do with the timing of our fiscal year. And because of that, I don't really have a lot of information right now what we will do for fiscal year 2020 because we're still only a few months into the year. Overall, we're in pharmaceuticals, so we're doing relatively well. But still a lot remains to be seen for what the rest of the year will look like.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's an interesting twist on the whole thing. I guess, if you're starting the fiscal year when it's all beginning versus others that, may either have fared okay or, obviously the converse, those that haven't fared very well for the first half of their fiscal year.
Melissa, I'm curious, when everything was hitting, were your targets already set for this current fiscal year, or did you have to just put a pause on that? And if you put a pause on it, have you come back to it, or like how do you even set targets in a time like this?
That is a good question. So for fiscal year 19, which just got paid out in the last couple of months, there was no change to anything.
Correct.
We really went kind of as is. For fiscal year 2020, I will be honest with you, I'm not as close to it. We are kind of in the
stage right now where we're setting and confirming the performance targets for the fiscal year 2020 bonus program. So I don't have all the details, but from what I'm hearing, we're not looking to decrease individual employee targets. The question will really be how we might adjust the performance measures for each of our businesses as it relates to what's going on. And I'm just not close enough at this point to really know what that's going to look like yet.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because a lot of businesses are struggling with how do you forecast with so many unknowns, and then that bleeds right into how do you set an appropriate payout curve on the incentive design. Are you more forgiving on the downside, and also a little bit kind of flatter on the upside as well in terms of managing windfalls? Do you put a range in there from a target perspective, so that because there's so many unknowns and there's going to be such volatility in performance? It does wreak a lot of havoc, right, in terms of not only setting the business targets, but then how do you translate it to incentive targets?
Yes.
So I think everybody's struggling with that.
Yes, absolutely. And on top of it, which many of us are, but we are a global organization. We have a big footprint in the United States, but we also have an equally sizable footprint in Asia and Europe. So there will definitely, I think, parts of our business that will fare better than others. But it's a little too soon yet. I don't really have a good indication of what we will be doing for this fiscal year. We're only a couple months into it at this point.
Got it. Thank you.
Other perspectives? Anybody who hasn't contributed, that has thoughts, ideas, any other perspectives to share?
This is Jane Montflis from Oil Dry Corporation. And
hi, Jane.
Honestly, we're not really doing anything differently because our company's been doing really well. We're considered essential. Our fiscal year ends at the end of this week. We're still planning on doing merits. We're going to have a phenomenal year with bonus payouts. Don't know what the results are yet, but we've been doing well during this time during COVID. What I think that we will probably look at is our sales compensation, which I know we haven't touched on here yet, but we've seen, a slide downward in certain business lines. And while we haven't changed any targets or sales goals, we are going to be taking a look at it after the fiscal year ends and looking to see if we should make any adjustments. But for the most part, we're still staying the course, and we intend to stay the course for our fiscal year 21.
So Jane, are you looking at it more through the lens of we had a phenomenal year, and I guess I don't know, whether COVID helped or hurt towards the end of your fiscal year, but are you looking to modify next year because potentially there's additional windfalls that are happening due to COVID, or just because you want to reset expectations based on the year that you had? And did COVID have anything to do with it, I guess is the question.
Well, we sell absorbent products, and one of those products is kitty litter. And surprisingly, kitty litter was booming for us in these last few months, if you consider everybody who probably went out and adopted a cat or were looking to use a lower price point product. So that was a booming business for us, but it's also a growing business for us. And we also just launched another growing business just before COVID, and we're all in on it. That one I think would be one that we're going to be having to kind of wait and see how well that takes off as a product for us. So it has to deal with animal health. So yeah, I think we're going to project out. I don't think we'll project out as large as we were in these last few months. I think we'll have some reasonable growth put into our plan, but we're still doing well. The only areas we're not doing well in is we supply the clay for the baseball fields. And baseball didn't get a big start this year. So that's kind of a downside for us. And some of our clay products for crops and that have been, so.
Great.
Hey, Jane, where does that clay come from? I'm dying to know. A little levity, sorry, but very curious.
I've been with Oil Dry for probably 6 months now and haven't been down to our, where they do all the cave, they go through the caves and everything to get that clay. But we have a few properties where we get that from. So the family who owns this company has been in the business for over 75 years.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
So I guess since you brought up, you know, sales compensation, sales commissions, you know, I guess that's, you know, kind of adjacent to incentive compensation. Is anybody doing anything dramatic there, either because of, you know, being in an industry where maybe there are windfalls that were unanticipated, or, you know, more likely due to sales commissions being, you know, dramatically off target, quotas being dramatically off due to, you know, people not being able to conduct business the same way, you know, and, you know, financials potentially not being where they were anticipated. Anybody have any specific experience with that or anything they want to share?
Well, one of the things that I'll say is that with my consulting clients, I've actually seen that there's a little bit more of a hesitancy to not do something with sales compensation, and a lot of it is driven by the pay mix of salespeople. So from a perspective of annual incentive, it's usually a smaller portion of pay, but with sales compensation, a lot of my clients have very leveraged positions where the pay is about 50% of the total remuneration that the person gets. So what I'm seeing there is a lot more guarantees of bonuses and switching targets or designs to make sure that they can still motivate the performance and also guarantee more payouts. So definitely been seeing a lot of switching of thinking in the sales compensation professionals to make sure that the world functions as similar to the normal, whatever that normal is, as possible.
Great, thanks for sharing. Others, anyone else? Anything else related to incentive compensation in general? I mean, any either experiences that people have had that, you know, have been out of the ordinary, or conversations that are happening because of anticipating, you know, we still have whole nother, for those of us that are on a annual calendar fiscal year, you know, got almost a whole half a year left of, you know, what could potentially be still a lot of unknowns. Any conversations surrounding that, or is that driving any considerations or communications to employees?
Yeah, Brian, you bring up a good point with regard to the communications. I mean, we recently did the communications to our employees. We always do that in the mid part of the year. We actually typically do it in the beginning of late July or beginning of August. We pushed it up a couple weeks this year. And we just let people know that, you know, hey, this is a challenging year, right? Bonuses are going to be a lot less than what they were prior year. So we're trying to be careful about, like, we're trying to make sure that we're balancing this. Let's maintain motivation, but at the same time, let's also make sure that we're being transparent, so we're not unleashing big surprises on people later in the year or beginning of next year. And it's tough to strike the right message there, because I mean there's so much emotion going through each of our businesses right now with our employees. But I'd be curious, you know, how other companies have managed that communications part. You know, are most companies, you know, sending those mid-year type messages, or a lot of companies just kind of staying silent for now and waiting it out? Just curious in terms of what you guys are experiencing.
Any thoughts?
I've definitely seen a lot of communication change over the last 4 months. I remember when everything first started, whether it was internally for our firm or for some of our clients, those communications kept coming some at first daily, then weekly. And as time went on, I've been seeing that a lot of the calls and messaging has moved more to biweekly or monthly. So the frequency of it, in my experience, has definitely decreased, but I think that communication is still there. It's more that the messaging is changing, and therefore of that, the frequency is. But the messaging changed very much from uh, how do we get up and running to and how do we make sure that everybody is safe and that we can function in this completely new situation, to now, well, this is a reality and this will be a reality for a really long time. So now let's start thinking as if nothing, quote unquote, happened, and we're just functioning in a brand new reality. So I've definitely seen a frequency and a content change, and I think part of it is just people learning to live with this situation and kind of going back a little bit to old habits where it doesn't feel as necessary to do as much communication as all of a sudden where the crisis was a little bit more in full force. Not sure if
I would say,
others got the same sensation.
I would say we, similar experience, but a little bit different. I think when all of this happened, we were in the midst of trying to make a significant change in our culture anyway. And, the frequency of communications went from, maybe quarterly to, we had emails and things like that. But when I think about like town halls or conference calls, went from a quarterly cadence to, like you said, almost weekly for a period of time. And now that the dust has settled, the messaging is changing a little bit, and continually trying to provide updates both on the state of the business as well as how are we looking at the future of reentry into the workplace. I would say now that the dust is settling a little bit, but I would say what used to be quarterly conversations is happening at least monthly now, and I anticipate it'll continue to be a monthly conversation for foreseeable future, and maybe in perpetuity. So I think it's interesting that the situation itself came at a time when we were trying to go through a significant cultural shift and trying to enhance communications. And as a result, I think we kind of expedited that process and probably took people out of their comfort zones, and people appreciated doing Zoom calls where, maybe before you just had a quarterly conversation and you heard the CEO's voice, and now you see the CEO's face in a live setting, on a monthly cadence. And I think people are really starting to appreciate the fact that they're seeing people, even if it is virtually face to face, but they're seeing a live person deliver the message, and the messaging is happening a lot more frequently than it did before. So, I think it's interesting to watch the evolution of it. And I think this is a situation where the pandemic may have expedited something that we already had on the to-do list anyway. And it's almost created, what the new, the new normal is going to be going forward. So it's almost setting the baseline expectations at this point.
Yeah, we have similar where we settled into a more routine type of cadence on the communications. It's very frequent on the front end, and then some parts of the business it was like weekly webcasts, and then slowly started to trickle to something that was more spaced out and sustainable. And my comment earlier was more so around the bonus update. But you're right. I mean, there's so much going on in the and so much going on in the business that communication is absolutely critical. And we're doing some other work in the business with values and meaning our global people department and beyond with values and D&I, et cetera. So there's a lot of other messages too that are being woven into those communications. So. To your point, it sounds like you had a lot of culture work going on. So but we're settling more into a routine, and of course the venue's there then to get all this other content in there as well. So it works out well.
How about others in terms of communication and, whether it's related to business performance and potentially incentive or merit or any other learnings from on the communications front, or things people are doing differently?
Hi, Brian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so my name's Sabina and I work for a company that deals with auto wreckage and salvaging. So as you can tell with people not driving, obviously our business is not doing so well. So we started receiving, around the time the pandemic happened, we started receiving weekly kind of emails from our CEO, which would have a video message attached into each one of those emails. And we continued to do so on that kind of cadence. We did pay out our 2019 bonuses above target for everybody in the beginning of February. And we sent out, like, as we call them, compensation statements on what your projected AIP might be for next year. But that was caveated with 2 messages that went out from our CEO that says, if we don't meet our financial performance metrics, then there is no payout for anybody. Since then, I know that we've kind of recovered most of our business, but not all of it. But the weekly communications I do find are going out more frequently, and each of the business leaders are also taking advantage of, this opportunity and this time to connect with their teams and kind of bring things down to, if it's technology, if it's HR, so on and so forth. So there's been a lot more Zoom meetings.
Well, thanks for sharing. Another a comment that came up was comment question: Are people doing anything differently in terms of hiring and compensation? Or are you sticking to your pay practices, or are you pivoting? And I can share, our experience is, we're kind of sticking to our pay practices, but I would say that we're really starting to look at things a lot more globally than we did before. I think, when we think about hiring, I don't think we're necessarily looking at things in the context of, our headquarters is in downtown Chicago. We need to hire somebody for this role at downtown Chicago. So I would say from that perspective, we're pivoting a little bit and having a lot more open-mindedness to, where is the talent pool we're really looking for? Is everybody even going to go back to the office, or is it going to be some set of the population? So that opens up interesting opportunities just in terms of, where you might recruit from a labor pool perspective. And, do you need to find somebody in the city of Chicago or New York, where we have a very significant presence, or can we be looking at, lower cost of labor markets for talent that maybe we wouldn't have necessarily been looking in those markets previously? So, it's a little bit of a pivot. But I guess I'd be curious to know if anybody else is seeing any changes in their hiring compensation practices related to what's going on.
Yeah, Brian, it's Diane. I feel like our company's was very kind of rigid a bit in, branches and everyone sitting in an office together in different locations. And, now I feel like there's definitely much more openness and flexibility because they've seen in the last 4 months the job is getting done. So I think there's definitely like much more an openness to it because they've seen that it works. And to your point, not everyone is sitting in Chicago and New York that's talented. So yeah, it seems like a good thing in my opinion.
I found it really interesting, Brian, when you mentioned that you might be tapping into lower cost of labor markets because the geography has opened up. And I wonder how much of far-reaching consequences that might have years to come if other firms start thinking that way as well. For example, from a perspective of internal pay equity. So now if that role can reside anywhere, can you opportunistically pay less just because somebody is not in San Francisco or not in New York, whereas, for example, the rest of your company is, or in Chicago and so on. So I just wonder whether firms will start taking advantage of those types of things in a smart way, or whether we'll find out years down the road that perhaps we have some unintended consequences that we're not even thinking about. So just musing about that, because it really caught my attention, and because that could become a trend. And I think it makes perfect sense, but I think it will just have consequences from pay policies and how we use that throughout.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And, I having come from consulting before I went to the corporate side, I struggle with this whole concept, because I don't think that we're doing it intentionally, at least not from the perspective of let's go look in lower cost of labor markets to find people. I think it's more a byproduct of, just having more openness to, we don't necessarily need to be looking on LinkedIn for people that are in the city of Chicago. So I think it's more of just opening the talent pool in terms of where we're looking. But the flip side of that is, I think I had mentioned, we're right in the midst of redoing our whole comp structure. And, as I think about this, and as we're trying to come up with design ideas, one of the things that keeps bubbling up is this whole concept of geographic differentials in general. If we think about, we'll probably have a smaller geographic footprint in terms of brick and mortar offices when we come out of this, and more people working from home. And, so how much does all of that play into, to your point, trying to manage internal equity, and to what extent do we need to, emphasize geographic differentials if we're not necessarily, plucking people to work in a brick and mortar office in Manhattan, but we're looking at, people that could be, say, in a 5-6 state area surrounding Manhattan. It just opens up some interesting new concepts or opportunities to take a look at the traditional, let's have a couple of different structures that are based on geography and things like that. And it's something we're grappling with right now.
Yeah, I mean, some of it too. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, Brian, around it boils back down to philosophy, right? What's the philosophy? Let that then drive the structure. I mean, do you believe in a national labor market where you want to have a national structure? Do you believe that, hey, well, no, actually, we should recognize the geographical differentials and therefore, have, various ranges based around that? I think there's ways of controlling for that in a pay equity model, right? Which again, pay equity model should be based on philosophy of the pay practices. So, it brings up some really good questions.
I think it will bring a lot of very positive changes as well. Like I like the thought process that Brian mentioned about like expanding on working from home policies and not being so stuck to one location, because I think it really will allow companies to tap talent better. So I hope, and I guess we'll see, but I would hope that some of those very positive things that are coming out of this situation are things that stick as well.
And this is Rena Somerson. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Rena.
Hey, I was just reading also that I think within probably 2 to 3 years, we're going to see, because of just what you were mentioning, we're going to have national pay rates for jobs, because you can get that tech worker in Silicon Valley or not. And a lot of these big ones are moving to completely remote. So I think we're going to start seeing more national rates, but less geographic differentials overall in the market.
I think so. I wouldn't be surprised to see it.
Mm-hmm. And then that facilitates too. I mean, if people become, and who knows if this is going to happen, if people become more mobile, right, jumping from location to location because of the newfound freedom there, right, then it's certainly a national structure helps facilitate that a lot better with a lot less administrative cumbersome.
And I think it's not even a national structure, but if you really push that even farther, what can you say to stop people from working internationally? If you want to live in the Bahamas or Spain and work because half of your workforce is remote, that might change a whole complete dynamic as well. I guess it's the international house hunters that's rubbing off me, but
as long as you work out the work out the tax issues and make sure corporate tax is involved, not to to ensure that you don't get into any
very
issues.
true, very true. But I think we may be up for a big cultural change coming up, or on the flip side, the moment everything goes away, people just return to the same old, which I think we may have a hard time doing. But that's where the flexibility of firms and philosophies, I think, is really going to come into play.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have time for one more comment here. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. Any other thoughts, closing comments? Anything else? Any ideas that pop to mind in terms of things that your organization's considering or have been struggling with? Okay. Well, I guess I just want to say thank you to everybody who participated in the call. Like I said, we're going to schedule another one for sometime in late August. And really the goal here is to just continue the conversation. I think things are continually evolving. States are going backwards, and I don't think this is over. And I think, when you think about it in the context of total rewards and, what can the Chicago Compensation Association bring to the table? I think it's networking and talking to peers and understanding how others are grappling with, however things change, however quickly they change. And I think it's going to be a continual evolution. So we're going to continue the dialogue, and appreciate everybody who participated today. And, if you have any additional thoughts or comments or future topics, please